I'm Alishiya. I've been with Y School New Mexico for 10 years. Yeah, being a part of the organization like every single sense, wore many hats. And then for 6 years, I've been the executive director. I stepped into the role a month before the shutdown, the pandemic started, with my previous co-executive director, Oriana, back there. So we were definitely in a very huge learning curve together. And then I've worked with nonprofits for over 13 years, so that's the experience I'm coming with. So I'm rounding out this day to bring it back to nonprofits. And in order to advocate for the arts as nonprofits, we also need to understand what are the current funding trends and why advocating for public funding is really important right now. The reality of funding for nonprofits right now, I think maybe it's not a misconception, there's lots of opportunities for arts nonprofits to get funded, but in the last couple of years, the reality is that it's more competitive and the access is shrinking. So some numbers for you. Just in 2025, when we saw the shifts in funding that impacted nonprofits and arts specifically, 20% of nonprofits lost funding, and about 36% of private donors didn't realize that and therefore would have donated more but didn't know about that. Organizations under 500K, so smaller nonprofits, are disproportionately impacted. When we have these cuts, that means that we have to cut, development departments, our operational services, and our staff ends up being the biggest thing to get cut first. Which, if we don't have our staff, how can we continue to do the work? This is from 23 to 24. Contributed revenue fell by 30%, and foundation revenue dropped by 25%. So if you're a nonprofit relying on private funding from philanthropy, from your donors, this means that your operational budget is like tightened a lot. And then you're requiring more uncontributed funds, which can be harder. We have a certain amount of contributed income we can have as a nonprofit. And while we understand what the funding the nonprofits is nationally, it's also important for us to understand what your own sector is. What is the trends in your own sector? For instance, I was on a grant panel, and on that grant panel, I had to review 10 circus organizations nationally. Out of the 10, 9 of them ended in a deficit of 75 to 100K. To me, that tells me that there is less funding for circus organizations. And so what can we do to advocate within our sector as well? So what do we do with all that information? I have been reflecting a lot about how we as nonprofits can be less competitive and be more advocates, not just for each other, but for other artists. And in order to do that, then we can advocate for the public. So to repeat that again, we as nonprofits should be advocates for other nonprofits before we go to the public and ask them for money. So questions I tend to ask before funding or starting a new project. Not every community requires creating a new brand program, but sometimes the strongest approach is collaborating. So I've seen it, especially just in the last couple of years, because scarcity can push organizations into competition, and many of our missions align. And then you'll see someone doing something similar to another organization, and really it's like, what happens when two organizations doing similar work can collaborate? Like, what is the impact we can have on the entire community to further that impact? Some questions I ask are, is there another organization already doing this work? If I'm seeing there's a need within my community, and are they doing it successfully? Could we collaborate to have a greater impact? And could resources be shared instead of duplicated? When, a bit like 2 or 3 years ago, Y School wanted to do a transportation program. We thought about who in our community, who in Santa Fe does it really well, and we thought of Girls Inc. So we went to Girls Inc. We're like, hey, can we collaborate? Due to their policies, that was not possible. However, they shared all their resources and policies with us, and then they even helped provide driving lessons for our coaches. And in exchange, we offered them free programming. So that's one example. And then really, WiseFul has been wanting to do this transportation program for so long. Reading Quest also, we were like, let's go in together and buy a bus. But then we both moved. We both got evicted. And so that couldn't happen. So I'm thinking about MATA, like, oh, if there's other organizations close to you, can you all get a bus together, transport kids from all over Santa Fe, and have a collaborative after-school program or summer program? And then one thing I've learned just working in nonprofit art space is that sustainability, is just pointing out, is rarely built alone. And so if we want to continue serving the communities, we have to be willing to share resources, share knowledge, and adapt together. So I am very strong on wanting to resource share with other nonprofits. If you are a well-resourced organization, can you loan your space out to someone else? Can you partner with other organizations? Can you co-host programs? Or can you yourself offer knowledge, such as grant sharing, mentorships, skill sharing, or exchange templates, policies, and trainings? And then, in an ideal world, can you share staff? So can you have collaborative teaching artists? Can you co-produce events together? And then can you do cross-organizational outreach? How amazing would it be if you could reach out to other organizations and say, hey, we're having trouble filling this. Can we collaborate? Can we share this out with your people and get your program filled, because our program's already filled up. One example we're doing this year is that we're collaborating with Santa Fe Community Yoga. So we're offering our space to them, and then in exchange, we're also doing a skill share. So I'll be talking about how to decolonize yoga and what it means to honor the roots of yoga. And then they'll come to us and tell us how to broaden our partnership even more. What are their policies? They do it pretty well. And what can we learn from them? I think about just also ways that larger or better resource organizations can help. There's a lot of organizations, because they are not a small nonprofit, so under 500K, are not eligible for some grants, some funding. And so what can larger or better resource organizations do to help smaller ones, such as advocating beside the smaller organizations, amplifying the smaller organizations, and then just like the tangible resources I've already mentioned. But I just want to end this by saying what becomes possible when nonprofits stop asking only how do we sustain ourselves and start asking how we sustain each other. So if you want to partner with WiseFul or you want to help collaborate together, please reach out. We would love to be a part of that. And coming back to that point, if we are not advocating for other arts organizations, then how can we advocate publicly? Let's be a more united front with each other as arts organizations to make a bigger impact.